We've all heard the stories of great empires, how they rise to these incredible heights, only to, well, eventually crumble. From ancient Rome to much more recent history, it seems to be this grand, repeating story of prosperity and then decline. In this explainer, we're going to dig into why that is.
So what's really driving this cycle? Is it just inevitable? And how does a nation build prosperity that actually lasts? That's the big question we're going to try and unpack here by looking at how economies grow, why they sometimes get stuck, and how they're ultimately reborn. Okay, let's dive right in. To understand the whole cycle, we first have to understand what gets that economic engine revving in the first place. What are the core components that actually power a nation's rise? At its most basic level, we are talking about economic growth. And it's a pretty simple idea, really. It just means a society is getting better at making more and higher quality stuff. We usually track this using something called real GDP, which is just the total value of everything a country produces, but adjusted for inflation so we can get a true comparison over time. So, growth isn't just one magic bullet. It's more like a recipe with some really key ingredients. You've got to have what's called human capital. That's a skilled, healthy, educated workforce. You also need better tools and infrastructure, of course. But the real secret sauce, the thing that brings it all together, is productivity. It's all about getting more bang for your buck, more output from the same inputs. That right there is the true engine of long-term prosperity.
Just think about the steam engine. That invention didn't just help people work a little harder. It completely transformed how work was done, period. This one piece of technology unlocked just massive gains in productivity, kicking off the entire Industrial Revolution and basically reshaping the whole world's economy. It is a perfect, powerful example of productivity in action.
In fact, an MIT economist named Robert Solow once estimated that a staggering 80% of the long-term rise in American income per person was thanks to technological progress. The message here is crystal clear. Lasting prosperity isn't just about having more stuff. It's about finding smarter, better ways of doing things. But here's where it gets really interesting. History shows us that this upward climb of growth is almost never a straight line. Nope, it's part of a much older, repeating cycle, an idea that people understood long before our modern field of economics even existed.
Way back in the 14th century, the North African historian Ibn Khaldun saw this exact pattern playing out across different empires. He figured out that the very success a society achieves can end up changing its behavior, and in doing so, sow the seeds of its own downfall. It's an incredibly powerful insight that's just as relevant today.
And here's how Ibn Khaldun saw that cycle playing out. It all starts with discipline, right? You have a motivated, unified group of people building something new. This leads to comfort, to prosperity. But then there's a shift. It moves toward decadence. The people at the top start focusing more on protecting what they have rather than creating new wealth. And eventually, that leads to decline because the very things that created the growth in the first place, that social unity, those incentives, they start to break down.
And that's the central paradox, isn't it? Success creates its own set of problems. The way Ibn Khaldun saw it, the whole system doesn't usually collapse because of some big shock from the outside. It collapses because it uses up its own internal strength. So let's take a closer look at those seeds of decay. What's actually happening, mechanically speaking, when that engine of growth starts to sputter and the cycle begins to turn downwards? It really all comes down to the rules of the game, what economists call a society's institutions. On one hand, you have inclusive institutions. Think of 17th century England. They create a level playing field, protect property rights for lots of people, and encourage widespread innovation. But on the other hand, you have extractive institutions, like in the old Soviet Union. These are designed to pull wealth from the many to benefit a tiny elite. They might create some growth for a while, but it's fragile. It's just not built to last. And you can really see the difference. On the left, there's an entrepreneur, Richard Arkwright, building his factory, feeling confident that his hard work and his ideas will be rewarded. On the right, you see forced labor building a canal. Now, both are creating economic output, sure, but one is built on freedom, investment, and innovation, and the other is built on coercion. One is sustainable, and the other, well, is not. We actually have a modern name for this phenomenon, the middle income trap. This is what happens when a country grows really fast by using cheap labor and copying existing technology. But then it just gets stuck. To make that next big leap to being a truly high-income, innovative economy, they have to fundamentally change the rules. And that can be a huge threat to the people in power. And that quote really gets to the absolute heart of the issue. The powerful elites often see progress itself as a threat. Think about it. New technologies and new businesses can totally disrupt their control and their source of wealth. So what do? They block them. They choose to protect their own power, even if it means sacrificing their nation's long-term prosperity.
This whole fear of disruption, it brings us to a really critical idea for understanding the final phase of this whole cycle. It's a turbulent, it's a messy, but it's an absolutely essential process of rebirth called creative destruction.
The economist Joseph Schumpeter came up with this term, and it's brilliant. It's the engine of real sustainable growth. It's this constant process where new ideas, new technologies, and new industries rise up and push out the old ones. Yeah, it's messy, and it definitely creates winners and losers, but it is exactly how an economy stays dynamic and evolves over time.
And hey, this isn't just some abstract theory. We can actually see it happening when we look at data on global trade. As economies mature, they start to shed those simpler, labor-intensive industries like growing basic crops and replace them with more complex, high-tech ones like building machinery or producing chemicals. The entire economic structure is constantly leveling up.
But here's the catch. For creative destruction to really work its magic, you need the right kind of environment. You need a society that actually allows people to experiment, to challenge the old ways of doing things, and to fail without being punished for it. You just can't get the creative part of creative destruction without the freedom to think differently.
And all of this brings this ancient cycle right to our doorstep. Today, we're facing our own unique set of challenges. Global growth is slowing down, populations in a lot of advanced countries are getting older, which could put a real drag on the workforce. We've got rising levels of debt that can choke off new investment, and even a technology as powerful as AI presents a huge question. Is it going to be the next great engine of creative destruction, or will it just create a whole new set of problems?
So it really leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. When you look at the challenges we face today, and you think about these historical patterns we've just walked through, where do you think we are in this great economic life cycle? Are we watching the slow decline of an old system? Or are we right on the edge of the next great wave of creative destruction that's about to spark a brand new beginning? The story, as always, is still being written.